Good evening, I'm John Lentz, City and State's managing editor, and this is Last Look. Today we're looking at one of our two cover stories, a story about Bill Thompson, one of the leading candidates for mayor in New York City, and I'm joined by one of the two authors, Nick Powell. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
And one thing about Bill Thompson, a lot of people point to his long career in government, his experience in finance, he was obviously a city controller, as advantages if he were to become mayor. This story looks at the other side, sort of whether he was a good manager or not. Maybe tell us a little bit about the story.
Sure. So Thompson has obviously had a long, like you said, a long career in city government. He was head of the Board of Education in the mid-90s. He was running the Controller's Office during the early part of the Bloomberg administration. These are two obviously huge agencies that have a lot of clout in city government. And from what Aaron and I found in talking to people who used to work under him and assorted other sources was that Thompson was kind of a hands-off manager of these, very powerful agencies. He delegated a lot of his responsibility in both the Board of Ed and the Controller's Office. As Controller, he conducted far fewer audits than his predecessor and his successor, John Liu being the successor and Hevesy being his predecessor. And he, in the Board of Ed, the Pataki administration did a study of some of their policies and found that they had a very, a weak capital planning strategy. They found a lot of the school facilities were in disrepair. So these are not things that a Democratic candidate for mayor would want, to highlight, obviously. So experience is one thing, but when you look at the actual track record, it paints a little bit of a different story.
Well, management is a big question for other candidates too. I think with Christine Quinn, you've had questions about her temper and she's very controlling. Bill de Blasio, the Times did a story about him, that he was very deliberative, maybe indecisive.
Right.
So how would you compare Thompson to some of these other leading candidates?
Well, so like you said, so Christine Quinn a lot has been made about her kind of iron-fisted authority within the city council. Right, de Blasio's got the indecisive label. Thompson, it's more just, surrounding himself with kind of the same people. He brought with him in the Controller's Office a lot of the people he used to work with at the Board of Ed, which when you look at the responsibilities of both agencies is kind of a strange thing. Controller obviously deals with a lot of finance. You oversee the pension fund. Board of Ed, you're overseeing the school system. So you would think he'd want to bring in people with more of a finance background. And to his credit, he did have some folks. Obviously, the Controller's Office is a huge agency. There, he did have some folks, with a financial background. But when his top advisors are largely political appointees, how much can you expect to be really the fiscal watchdog of the city?
So you also tracked down a 2005 draft audit from the Pataki administration. So it shows that some people were scrutinizing Thompson at the time. Tell us about that draft audit, what was in it?
Sure. So the state insurance department under George Pataki conducted audits of all 5 of the New York City pension funds. This particular one was looking at the teachers' pension fund and found that the Board of Trustees, of which the Controller is a key member, and pretty much from what I understand, they take their cues from him, did not provide adequate investment guidelines. The Controller was not present at a lot of Board of Trustee meetings, and this is, these are you're an investment advisor as Controller. That's one of the basic functions of your office. So, to say that you're, not providing guidelines on how, a huge pension fund is being invested, I think speaks to kind of Thompson's, like I said, hands-off management style.
So one thing I also found striking in your story is the discussion of city time and Bill Thompson's role there. It was something I think that had been flagged while he was city controller, but he didn't really take any action. Tell me about that.
So to understand that, first you have to understand the relationship between Thompson as controller and Mayor Bloomberg at the time. They were, from all accounts, had a pretty close working relationship. They golfed together occasionally. This wasn't the typical controller-mayor relationship where the controller's the watchdog and the ultimate check on the mayor. So understanding that, then within the scope of city time, Thompson, yes, it's his responsibility to look for this stuff. He should have probably monitored it more closely. But when we asked him about it, he said that part of the reason that he didn't challenge him was because he basically put faith in the mayor and his budget director that they had the problem under control. He said it was part political calculus. He was planning on running for mayor, so obviously if he thought that there was something really egregious wrong with the city time thing, he would have challenged him, at least publicly. But yeah, it was a huge scandal in the Bloomberg administration, and if you're the chief financial officer, that's probably part of your responsibility to look for things like that.
Now, I also wanted to ask you about stop and frisk. You touch on that in your story. It's been something where Thompson has tried to maybe play both sides on this issue.
Yes.
Tell me about that, and what role do you think it has in him getting support or not?
Right. Well, so stop and frisk is obviously an issue that's very close to the African American community, which constitutes pretty much a large portion of Thompson's base. Thompson has taken a more of a moderate stance, he would argue nuanced, I think, but that he doesn't want to ban the practice altogether like some of his opponents, like Bill Blasio or John Liu have, but he wants to reform the practice. So whether that, there are some in the black community that, are in favor of stop and frisk. They think, it does keep their community safe and things of that sort. But obviously, the number of stops have risen astronomically, and they're still targeting largely black and Hispanic teenagers. So as just a issue that pertains to your community, you would think you would want to take the most firm position against something like that, like some of his opponents have. But he's managed to keep kind of a middle of the road stance. It helped him get a couple of the more conservative uniform unions like the PBA and the UFA and some other police unions. And it remains to be seen. I mean, his numbers in the black community are kind of evening out with Bill de Blasio digging into a little bit of his support with the help that he's obviously got an African-American wife and a biracial family, which obviously just on pure aesthetics would appeal to a very diverse city. So we'll see what happens on primary day. I would imagine the numbers will even out for Thompson once people actually cast their ballot, but if it turns out that he's lost a lot of black support at the end of Tuesday, then we'll could probably point to stop and frisk as one of the reasons why.
Sure. Nick Powell, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for Last Look. For other Last Look videos, go to our website, cityandstateny.com.